The Rise and Fall of Gurara Capital. Season 1, Episode 1, The Humble Giant.
Another long day at Gurara Capital. I walked through the front doors early in the morning as the sun rose. I enjoyed being early because it allowed me to settle in before everyone else arrived. I walked past the rows of empty desks, the air conditioner's soft hum being the only sound in the room. My desk was tucked away in a corner, not particularly noticeable, but that was fine with me. I didn't need to be seen, I just needed to complete my work. My name is Umar Yusuf, and I have been with Gurara Capital for several years. I've helped it grow from a small business with a few employees to the large bustling enterprise it is today. But if you asked my co-workers, they would say they barely noticed me. I was not the type of person to draw attention. I dressed simply, my shoes were scuffed, and my hair was always a little messy. To them, I appeared insignificant. They didn't realize that I was often the one who solved the company's most difficult problems. My mornings always began in the same way. I would make myself a cup of tea, sit at my desk, and review the previous day's reports. Numbers were my speciality. I could look at a spreadsheet and understand the story behind the numbers. Today, while sipping my tea, I noticed something odd in the financial report. There was a minor inconsistency that most people would overlook. It was an error that could cost the company a lot of money if not corrected. I frowned and leaned closer to my computer screen, tapping the keys as I ran the numbers again. I knew I needed to act quickly. I sent an email to my manager, Mr. Okoro, explaining the error and how we could correct it. I did not expect a response. Mr. Okoro usually ignored my messages. He would read them, take credit for the solution, and then move on. I didn't mind very much. As long as the company was doing well, I was satisfied. I had never been interested in praise or recognition. Later that morning, the office started to get crowded. I heard the click of heels on the floor and the chatter of my colleagues as they greeted one another. I kept my head down and focused on my work. I heard Mr. Okoro's voice from across the room. He was speaking to a group of people, explaining how he discovered an error in the financial report and corrected it before it caused a problem. I smiled to myself and shook my head. It didn't matter who received credit as long as the problem was resolved. "Hey, Umar." I looked up and saw Tunde, one of my colleagues, standing by my desk. He was dressed in a sharp suit, and his shoes were polished to a shine. He gave me a grin, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning, Tunde," I said, nodding.
Morning. Listen, can you help me with something? I've got this report and I can't make sense of it. You're good with numbers, right?
He handed me a stack of papers, not waiting for my response. I took the papers and nodded again. "Sure, I'll take a look."
Thanks, Umar. You're a lifesaver.
He walked away, already talking to someone else, not even glancing back at me. I sighed and turned my attention to the report. It was a mess, but I knew I could sort it out. I always did. By lunchtime, I had finished Tunde's report and returned it to him. I took my lunch from my bag, a simple meal of rice and vegetables, and went to the break room. The majority of my colleagues went out for lunch to fancy restaurants or cafes nearby. I couldn't afford that, and I preferred the quiet. I sat at a table by myself, eating my lunch and listening to the conversations around me. They discussed their weekend plans, the new films they wanted to see, and the expensive gadgets they'd purchased. I didn't have much to say in those conversations, so I kept to myself. After work, I took the bus home. The ride was long, but I didn't mind. It gave me time to think. I lived in a tiny flat on the outskirts of town. It wasn't a lot, but it was home. I unlocked the door and entered, greeted by the familiar smell of spices from the kitchen. My mother was making dinner and smiled when she saw me. "Welcome home, Umar," she said with a warm voice. "Thanks, Mama," I said, setting my bag down and approaching to assist her. Home was different than work. I was seen here. I was valued. My mother knew how hard I worked, even if no one else did. She always assured me that one day people would recognize my worth. I wasn't too sure. People at work only noticed what was on the surface. They assumed I was unimportant based on my simple clothes and quiet demeanor. But Mama always believed in me, and that was sufficient. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the day. I reflected on the error I had discovered in the financial report and how Mr. Okoro had taken credit for it. I thought of Tunde, who had handed me his work without hesitation. I wondered if anything would ever change. Perhaps one day, someone will notice what I did for the company. Maybe one day I'll be more than just the man in the corner that everyone ignores. But for the time being, I'd continue to do my best, even if no one noticed. The next day started just like any other. I arrived at my desk early, sipping my tea and reviewing the reports. However, there was something different in the air, a sense of unease, as if a storm was approaching. I heard murmurs as people arrived at the office. I overheard bits and pieces of conversations, something about management changes or a new employee. I didn't pay close attention at first. Changes occurred frequently, but they rarely affected me. But then I overheard her name, Sarah Mark. The CEO's daughter returned from Lagos. She was taking over some of the operations, introducing new ideas and ways of doing things. I felt a chill run down my spine. I had heard of Sarah before. She was known for being ambitious and wanting to make significant changes. I wondered what that meant for someone like me who remained in the background and wasn't flashy or impressive. As the day went on, the feeling of unease grew stronger. I saw Mr. Okoro in his office, speaking with a woman I assumed was Sarah. She wore a sharp suit with perfectly styled hair and a serious expression. She scanned the office, her gaze settling on me for a brief moment. I quickly looked down at my computer screen and pretended to be busy. I did not want to draw attention. I had a feeling that whatever changes were coming would be bad for someone like me. That evening, as I rode the bus home, I couldn't shake the feeling of anxiety. I knew things were about to change at Gurara Capital, but I wasn't sure if I was prepared for them. But whatever happened, I would face it the same way I had faced everything else, with quiet determination, hard work, and the hope that one day someone would recognize my worth. Mama was waiting for me when I got home, her smile as warm as ever. She asked me about my day, and I told her it was fine, even though I felt anything but fine. She patted my shoulder and told me not to worry, that everything would work out in the end. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that one day people would see me for who I really was, that they would understand how much I had done for the company. But for now, I would keep working, keep doing my best, even if no one noticed. The storm was coming, and I knew I couldn't avoid it, but I was ready to face it, whatever it brought.